Now the next one is sharing rules. So sharing rule is a sharing setting with which you can share the records of a group of users or the users who belong to certain role with the same group of users or another group of users or the users who belong to certain role. So by various combinations, the records can be shared amongst users with the help of sharing rule. But sharing rule will be useful if organization wide default is bit restrictive. Means if OWD for any object is private or public read only, then you can use sharing rule. If OWD is public read write, then we don't need sharing rule, because if OWD is public read write, it means any user with read and edit permission is basically able to read and edit all the records of that object. In that case, it's not really required to have a sharing rule on the object. When OWD is private, in that case, the records of the object are not shared amongst users. And then in that case, if you have a requirement where a certain group of users records need to be shared with another group of users or within the same group of users, then we can go for sharing rule. So the definition is, it's a sharing setting to share records of a group of users with same or another group of users. Okay. So you can create a group of users in Salesforce. So by group, you can share the records with the help of sharing rule, or by role also. Okay. So users who belong to certain role. So sharing rule is a sharing setting with which you can share the records of a group of users or the users who belong to certain role with same or another group of users or the users who belong to certain role. So for this, let's take one requirement. We will consider that OWD for the account object is set as private, and in that case we have user U1 and U2. So as OWD is private, U1 is not able to access U2's records and U2 is not able to access U1's records. Now there is a requirement from business users saying that user U2 should have read and edit access on U1's account records. So this is where we are in need of sharing rule, because at the moment with this current setup, it is not possible at the moment it is not possible for you to to read and edit account records of U1 as OWD is private. So we can create a sharing rule and share the records of U1 with U2. So let's have a look on how to create a sharing rule. As sharing rule is also a sharing setting, we are already on the sharing settings page. So just after organization by default table, we have sharing rule section, where for every object we have sharing rule. For lead object, for account object, contact, opportunity, case, every object you can create sharing rule. As we want to create sharing rule on account, we need to go to account sharing rule section. Here I think there are already two sharing rules created by me earlier. I'll just delete those. So now there are no sharing rules on account. So let's create a new sharing rule. Click on the new button. Then specify the sharing rule name. Account sharing rule. Step 2 is to select sharing rule type. So again, in sharing rule we have two types, based on record owner and based on criteria. So based on record owner means you want to share the records based on the owner of the records. So if you see this requirements, the requirement is U1's account record need to be shared with U2. Means the account records owned by user U1 need to be shared with U2. So we have to go for based on record owner, because the requirement is the records owned by user U1 need to be shared with U2. Yeah. Now where can we use based on criteria? So let's take another requirement for this. So let's say U1 user U1 needs read access on all account records who belong to country India. So here all the account records where the country is India, those account records need to be shared with U1, which means the records which satisfy certain criteria. What is that criteria here? Country should be India. Those records need to be shared with U1. So this is where we have to go for based on criteria type. Okay. Any questions? Any doubts so far? No?
No.
Alright. So we will first create sharing rule on this requirement 1 as we are already doing, and then we will create one more sharing rule for the second requirement. So for the first requirement, as I mentioned, we need to go for based on record owner. Step 3, is where you can select a group of users whose record we want to share. And in step 4, we need to again select a group of users with whom we want to share the records. In step 3 and step 4, you cannot select any specific user. You can select a group of users, or you can select a role, or you can select roles and subordinates. And in step 4 also same, public group, role and roles and subordinates. As I mentioned, you can share the records of the users who belong to certain role with this, the users who belong to maybe same role or another role, or the users who belong to certain group. So for this specific requirement, what we need to do is we need to create two public groups. One public group will have user U1 in it, and another public group will have user U2 in it. So let's create public groups first. To create a group, you can just search for public groups in quick find search box. Under users, you will find public groups. I'm just opening it in a new tab. So in this public group section, you can see there are few public groups which I have already created. Let's create a new group. Click on the new button to create new group. Here we can specify the group name. I'll say account group 1. And then in this group, what we want to add a specific user. So you can select users from the search box. As a member of any group, you can add either user or the existing group or the entire role also as a member of group. But for this particular requirement, we are just going to add a user. So we will add user U1 to this account group 1. Then let's save this group. Let's click on the new button, and we will have to create one more group. We will name it as account group 2. Okay. And then in this group, we will have to add user U2. So again, from the search drop down, select users, and let's say this user is user U2. So we will select this user and add it to a group. Let's save. So now we have two groups, public groups created. So we can go back to the sharing rule, and as we open this page before creating groups, those public groups will not be reflected over here. So I will have to just refresh this page again. Let's specify the sharing rule name. Step 2, rule type is based on record owner. Step 3, we want to share user U1's records. Where is user U1? It is in account group 1. So select account group 1. Then user U1's record need to be shared with user U2. Where is user U2? It is in account group 2. So select account group 2. And then what is the access level we want read and edit access. So in the default account access, we need to select read and write. So this is how user U1's records will be shared with U2 with read and edit access with the help of sharing rule. Okay. Are you following? Any doubt here?
No.
Okay. So let's save this sharing rule. As soon as we save the sharing rule, all the existing records which are owned by user U1 will be automatically shared with user U2, and all the other future records which are going to be created, and if user U1 is going to be the owner of those records also will be automatically shared with U2 due to this sharing rule. So we can see this sharing rule created on account. Now we will create sharing rule for the second requirement. Just give me 2 minutes. I'll be back.
Hello, Rohit. You there? Hello. I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, I think he said give him 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, okay. I probably didn't hear that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I got a call. So let's create a sharing rule on the second requirement. The second requirement is U1 needs read access on all account records who belong to country India. So here, based on the criteria, we need to share records with a user. So this is where we need to go for based on criteria sharing rule. So we will have to create a new sharing rule on the account object itself. So click on the new button. Then specify the sharing rule name. Now in step 2, we need to select the type as based on criteria. As soon as you select based on criteria as the type, step 3 changes. Now in step 3, we can specify criteria. So what is that criteria? Billing country should be India. Billing country is the standard field on account where you actually populate the country or account. Billing country equals India. This will be our criteria, and all those records which satisfy these criteria need to be shared with user U1. So we can select user U1 in step 4. Where is user U1? In account group 1. So select account group 1 here in step 4. And then the level of access required is read access. Accordingly, I think the access level is set to read only, which is fine. So this is how, based on criteria, the records can be shared with a group of users or the users who belong to certain role as well. So let's save this. We have created both the sharing rules now. Any questions about sharing rule then? So we are done with the sharing rule.
No.